guys, we're back talking some more Bel-Air on the channel. The 7th episode dropping this week on Peacock. Ever since that last episode, the way that we ended things off between Uncle Phil and Lisa's dad going to war in the political space, I've been very excited to see where we're going next with that storyline, the beef between those two. Things definitely do heat up between the two of them in this episode, but practically everybody's plotline in this episode was pretty juicy this week. I was actually invested in almost everyone's storyline, even if the main storyline revolved around Will throwing a party at the Banks house. I feel for Will and Lisa in this situation because of the fact that they are stuck between this rock and a hard place. Both of their dads don't get along, and both of them don't want them seeing one another, so they have to get kind of creative and sneak around them just to see one another, and the fact that they're sneaking around Carlton too because of the fact they have not told Carlton they're trying to get back together, and that is a big thing that's kind of looming over the entire episode, them trying to tell Carlton, but there's never a great time to tell him. Speaking of Carlton, out of everyone in this episode, I think he had some great character growth here. It's a very solid episode all around for Carlton. After just so many episodes where he lets these preppy kids like Connor be so disrespectful around him, it made me glad that he finally put his foot down and took him out on the lacrosse field regardless of the consequences, since his popularity at the school kind of took a hit after he did so. I chalk it up as a good learning experience for Carlton, and a little bit of karma too with the realization he has when he's talking to Will, because now he has that realization he was treating Will just as bad as these people are treating him at school, and he even apologizes for it, so that was a nice moment there. Coupling that with the conversation that follows with Will offering to help Carlton out and kind of boost his popularity at school by throwing this big party, it felt like that classic Will and Carlton bonding from the original series, and that made me happy. I'm hoping we get to see more of that as the episodes unfold, but I'm not really sure because of the way that this episode ends. We'll get there eventually. Between his breakdown in the last episode and some of the events that unfold in this episode, it has kind of started to make me feel bad for Carlton, even when Will sets him up with this girl and he's talking to her at the party, because the girl kind of insinuates that he isn't black enough, which I definitely think is not a very friendly thing to say to somebody, but at the same time, I think it kind of gave Carlton some of that motivation to stand up to Connor when he does show up to the party uninvited, and he does demand an apology from him for being so openly racist around everybody at the school. All around, I think that was a great moment for Carlton as a character, kind of showcasing that we are kind of seeing him drift away from that annoying rich boy preppy aesthetic and just trying his best to find himself in some shape or form. I mean, we'll see. I mean, that's just my idea of the situation. Of the big storylines going into this week's episode, the one that I was most excited to delve into a bit more was all the drama between Uncle Phil, Vivian, and Reed. Personally, to me, this was some of the best stuff in the episode, the way that we went to unexpected territory. It escalated a lot more than I thought it would. Poor Uncle Phil, man. I mean, he's juggling all the problems with Lisa's dad and all the stuff with his political campaign, while also dealing with Vivian and Reed. As him and Vivian argue over some things and then come to find out that Vivian's going to an art fair that Reed's going to be attending, we find out a lot of that stuff thanks to Jeffrey's intel, because Jeffrey does come back with this big folder with all this dirt on Reed, and some of it is pretty juicy and leads to some of the fun stuff in the episode. With everything going on with Uncle Phil, I didn't anticipate him going just to the party to interrupt everything between Reed and Vivian and kind of pull up the dirt right in front of her. The dirt that Uncle Phil pulls up on Reed isn't really anything all that shocking to me. You know, he's a womanizer, he preys upon these young artists. It seemed to be that was kind of the case here with Vivian as well. It was kind of his next victim. The dirt that was pulled up on Reed by Uncle Phil didn't really change all that much, which is kind of a surprise. It kind of just changed the trajectory of the argument between Uncle Phil and Vivian over her pursuits of art. I'm torn though in this entire argument between Vivian and Phil, because I do think that Phil is being a little bit overprotective about everything going on between Vivian's art and Reed, and hasn't openly, publicly supported Vivian's return to art, but he has been supporting it on the down low that she doesn't know about and he doesn't really bring up at all. Nevertheless, it seems like Vivian's relationship with Reed is still going to go forward, because it seems like they're going to be still in business in some shape or form when it comes to her artwork. Every week in this show, I swear, I just have no clue where we're going with the direction of Hillary's storyline. Now we have her as this thirsty chef after that video we saw her make at the end of last week's episode with her in lingerie making these cooking videos. It still all around feels like a weak point to me compared to all the other plot lines going around. It kind of takes away from the plot lines that I feel are much more important, as I just find it very difficult to get invested in the storyline swirling around her, where Hillary's going to try and find Kylo, the head of her influencer house, because of the fact that he uploaded that video of her without her permission, which is a very messed up thing to do, but in the context of everything going on in the story, it's just not as interesting. I did, however, like the scenes with her and Jazz, because Jazz shows up to the party. They have some fun banter back and forth. It's been a fun subversion of those two characters from the original series because of the fact that Jazz had a huge crush on Hilary in the series, and Hilary never really paid him any mind whatsoever. But it is the opposite in the series because they actually seem to have some sort of reciprocated feelings for one another, and they even go to confront Kyler together about the video. Much like Jazz in this segment, I too was pretty disappointed in Hilary because Hilary kind of sacrificed some of her pride in the sake of this Victoria's Secret deal and kind of goes against her feelings towards the entire situation for the entire episode just in the sake of this influencer brand deal. As we wrap up things with this episode, it does have me locked in to find out what happens next week, whether it's Will and Lisa finally hooking up at the tail end of the episode, or the fact that Connor calls the cops on the party and the cops try to harass Carlton because he is in charge of the house after all. But that's how Carlton finds out that Lisa and Will are together when Lisa comes down to stop the cops from harassing him. What a way to end off the episode. Just from the looks that everyone was giving one another at the end of the episode, I know that it's going to be very interesting to see what happens next week. Make sure you share your thoughts down below. What did you think of this episode of Bel-Air? It'll be on Peacock, I think, relatively soon. I know I see these episodes early. I talk about it every week in the comments section. People still ask me. I get them early. It's a screener kind of thing, you know, critic kind of stuff. But I am curious to hear what you guys think about the episode when it does air on Peacock. Because part of the fun of all this is having that conversation with you guys in the comments section down below. But as always, thank you guys so much for checking out the reviews for Bel-Air. I really do appreciate that. Make sure to like on the video and also subscribe to the channel to update review restrictions, unboxings, and more. But the next time, I'll see you guys later.